The night carried the scent of rain yet to fall. A thin breeze whispered through the cracked sidewalks of Westfield Street, tugging at loose flyers stapled to old lampposts. Inside Murphy's Corner, the world felt smaller, quieter. The kind of bar where the shadows outnumbered the patrons, and the jazz hummed low, as though it too was tired. Robert Hayes pushed open the weathered wooden door and let it creak shut behind him. He liked the sound, old, dependable, like the rest of this place. Murphy didn't ask questions, and Robert never offered answers. He walked straight to his usual stool, worn smooth from years of leaning, and found his pint already waiting for him. "You look beat," Murphy muttered, polishing a glass with a rag that had seen better days. Robert gave a half-smile. What else is new? He was 40 now, though his reflection told him 45. The years had weighed on him, not the kind you count on a calendar, but the kind you carry in your chest. His hands, once clean and steady from years as a mechanical engineer, now bore scars of stubborn bolts and oil stains that never fully washed out. He raised the glass, let the foam brush his lips, and welcomed the familiar bitterness. Another night, another silence. And then she entered. The door opened softly, and the energy in the bar shifted, though no one but Robert seemed to notice. She wasn't the kind of woman who blended into places like Murphy's. No, she carried herself like she was walking into a boardroom. Straight posture, sharp suit, a watch that probably cost more than the bar's monthly rent. Not a hair out of place. She chose a stool 3 seats down. Not close enough to seem intentional, not far enough to be distant. She placed her phone face down, as though to declare war against the world outside, and ordered whiskey, neat. For a while, there was only the sound of jazz, the faint clink of glasses, and 2 strangers breathing the same dim air. And then, without warning, she turned her head toward him. Her eyes locked on Robert's with a sharpness that startled him. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't small talk. It was the kind of look you give when you've already decided to risk something. "If you had one wish," she asked, voice steady but her gaze intense, "who would you use it for?" The question seemed to hang in the air, caught between the notes of the saxophone. Robert blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. A stranger, asking him something most friends never dared. He set his glass down, his fingers trembling ever so slightly against the condensation. Memories rushed in: his wife Sarah, gone 5 years now, their daughter Lily, asleep back home, probably clutching her worn-out storybook. "My daughter," he said finally. His voice carried no hesitation. "I'd use it for her, to give her everything I can." The woman studied him, as though his answer was a mirror reflecting something inside her. The corners of her mouth softened into the hint of a smile. "Not for yourself?" she asked. Robert's chest tightened. He wasn't used to being this open. Not with strangers. Not with anyone. But the words came anyway. "She is myself." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind that made the rest of the world disappear. For the first time in a long time, Robert felt seen. Not as the tired repairman. Not as the widower. Just as a man who had given his whole heart to a little girl who needed him. The woman leaned back, swirling her glass. Her name, he didn't know it yet. Her life, a mystery. But in that dim bar, something unspoken tethered them together. 2 people who didn't belong in each other's worlds, yet somehow did in that moment. Robert broke the quiet with a half-smile. Strange question for a Tuesday night. Her lips curved, this time into something real. Stranger answer. And just like that, the night had shifted. What began as 2 strangers in a bar had become something else. A conversation waiting to happen. A collision neither had planned. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, low and steady. The storm was coming. And inside, so was something else. But neither of them knew just how much that single question would change everything. What secret weight does this mysterious woman carry? And why did she ask him of all people that question? The storm outside had begun to whisper against the windows, soft taps of rain on glass, like an impatient rhythm. Inside Murphy's, the jazz played on, steady and unbothered. Robert turned his glass slowly between his fingers. The stranger beside him had already cracked open a door in his chest he hadn't realized was still locked. He should have brushed it off, changed the subject. But instead, he found himself saying words he hadn't shared with anyone in years. "I never planned on being a single father." The woman didn't interrupt. She just watched him, her whiskey untouched, her attention unwavering. "At 32, Robert continued, I had it all figured out. Career as an engineer, a wife I adored, dreams of a house filled with laughter. Then Lily was born. Tiny, perfect. My whole world fit into the palm of my hand." He paused, swallowing the weight of memory. His thumb traced the rim of his glass. But 3 years later, Sarah's heart just gave out. Doctors used phrases like acute cardiac event and unforeseen complications. What they really meant was she was gone, and I was left with a little girl who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. The woman's eyes softened. She didn't look away, didn't pity him. She just listened. "I sold our house to pay the bills," Robert went on, voice low. "Left the corporate job. Couldn't juggle the hours, not with a child who needed me more than any company did. So I opened a repair shop. It pays the rent, keeps the lights on. My hands, they were once made for design. Now, they're just permanently stained with grease." He gave a hollow laugh, lifting his palms as if to prove the truth. "And Lily?" the woman asked gently. Robert's face softened. "She's 8 now. Brilliant. Curious. Obsessed with stars and butterflies. I learned to braid her hair through YouTube tutorials. Learned which way to cut sandwiches so she'd actually eat them. At night, we sit on our tiny balcony, look at the constellations. I tell her, even when you're lost, there are fixed points to guide you home." He fell quiet, the weight of his own words pressing against him. The woman's glass finally touched her lips. She took a sip, then set it down with deliberate calm. "My name is Emma," she said at last. Her voice was steady, but there was something brittle underneath, like glass that might shatter if tapped too hard. "Emma." Robert tested the name on his tongue. "And you? What about your wish?" Emma's gaze drifted toward the rain-streaked window. For a moment, her polished exterior slipped, revealing a tiredness hidden beneath the elegance. "I've spent my life climbing ladders I never built," she murmured. "At 16, I was in university. At 24, I had my first company funded. At 30, I was on the cover of a magazine." She gave a sharp little laugh. "And at 35, I realized I'd built a life filled with everything except people." Robert tilted his head. "No family." "2 parents," Emma said. "Brilliant, respected, cold. They raised me to believe achievement was the only currency worth anything. And I believed it. Until I didn't." Her hand traced the rim of her whiskey glass. 6 months ago, I ended an engagement. I overheard him talking about me not as a person, but as a strategic partnership with beneficial synergies. She let the bitterness linger in her words. "Imagine realizing the person who's supposed to love you most sees you as a contract." Robert's jaw tightened. "Sounds like a fool." "Sounds like my life," she corrected softly. They sat in silence, 2 broken stories laid bare on the scarred wooden counter of Murphy's Corner. Finally, Robert asked, "So why here? Why me? Why ask a stranger about wishes?" Emma's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Because strangers don't need anything from me. Not money, not status, not decisions. Just an answer." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with truths they hadn't expected to share, but somehow needed to. Emma leaned closer, her voice dropping into something almost conspiratorial. "Do you know anything about stars?" Robert chuckled. "A little. Taught my daughter to find the North Star. Told her, no matter how lost you feel, it's always there. Always pointing home." Emma's eyes softened, her shoulders easing for the first time all night. "I funded an observatory once," she admitted, shaking her head. "Never had the time to actually visit it. Strange, isn't it? You teach stars to your daughter with a garage sale telescope. I buy observatories and don't look through a single lens." The irony hung in the air, almost bitter. And then, the strangest thing happened. Emma smiled. A real smile. Not the picture-perfect one for cameras or investors, but a fragile, fleeting thing that made Robert forget the storm outside. For nearly 3 hours, they talked. About childhoods and books. About Lily's butterfly project and Emma's disastrous attempt at building her first computer at 12. They traded stories like old friends, but with the raw honesty of people who knew they might never meet again. When the clock neared midnight, Emma glanced at her watch, reluctant. I should go. Early meeting. Murphy slid the check toward them. Robert reached for it out of habit, but Emma's hand was quicker. Please, she said softly. Let me. He hesitated, then nodded. Something in her tone wasn't about money. It was about gratitude. Emma stood, gathering her purse. For the first time, she looked directly at him. Her voice quiet, steady. You're the only person who made me feel visible tonight. Thank you for that. And before Robert could respond, she was gone. The door swung shut, leaving the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. Robert sat in silence, staring at the empty stool she had left behind. He told himself it was a chance encounter, a single night carved out of the ordinary. But deep down, something told him this wasn't the end. Not even close. Emma walks back into Murphy's corner a second time, but this time, Robert isn't there. Why is she searching for him? And what will she risk to find him again? The city was alive with its usual noise. Car horns echoing off glass towers, hurried footsteps splashing through puddles left by last night's storm. But Emma Winters barely heard it. Her calendar was a battlefield of meetings, investor calls, and press briefings. Her assistant had texted 3 times already. You're late for the quarterly review. And yet, here she was, in the back seat of her sleek black car, swapping her tailored suit for jeans and a plain blouse. The kind of clothes that made her look like anyone else. She slipped off her jewelry, the polished armor she wore for the world, and tucked it into her bag. Take the evening off, Thomas, she said to her driver, ignoring his raised brows. I'll call when I need you. 6 blocks later, she pushed open the door to Murphy's corner. The bar looked exactly the same. Same scuffed floorboards, same lazy jazz floating through the air, same weathered sign above the counter. It was unremarkable, which was precisely why it felt like a refuge. Her eyes flicked instantly to the spot where Robert had sat the night before. Empty. Emma exhaled, surprised at the pang of disappointment. She took the same stool as before, ordered the same whiskey. And then she waited. The minutes stretched into hours. The bar filled with life around her, a couple celebrating an anniversary, a group of office workers laughing too loud, a woman sipping wine while lost in a book. But not him. Murphy, polishing a glass behind the counter, eventually broke the silence. Doesn't come in every night, he said casually. Usually Tuesdays. Sometimes Fridays. Emma blinked. I wasn't. I didn't mean. Murphy cut her off with a knowing half-smile. You must have made an impression. He doesn't talk to strangers. Heat rose in Emma's cheeks. She wasn't used to being read so easily. What's his name? She asked before she could stop herself. Robert. Robert Hayes. Murphy leaned on the counter, lowering his voice as though sharing a secret. Runs Hayes Repair Shop. Fixes just about anything mechanical. Good with his hands. Helped me rebuild my fridge last summer when the supplier wanted to charge double. Emma nodded slowly, committing every detail to memory. Robert Hayes. Repair Shop. Westfield. She reached into her purse, pulled out a card. One embossed with her name and title. Emma Winters, CEO. Horizon Technologies. Her professional identity in ink and weight. For a moment, she hesitated. Then, turning it over, she scribbled a short line on the back. If you ever need more than repairs, call me. No name. Just her private number. The one only 5 people in the world had. She slid it across the bar. Give this to him if he comes in. Murphy accepted it with a nod. Emma finished her drink, left a generous tip, and walked back into the night. But as she turned the corner, something inside her twisted. Why was she doing this? She didn't chase people. Not friends, not lovers. She was always the one pursued, the one others tried to reach. And yet, here she was, leaving breadcrumbs for a man whose world couldn't have been further from hers. Back in her penthouse that night, she stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city she had conquered. Light stretched endlessly below, a kingdom of glass and steel. But in that vast expanse, all she could think about was a man with grease-stained hands who had spoken of stars as if they were anchors to life itself. For the first time in years, she wasn't analyzing her emotions like a business report. She was simply feeling them. 6 days passed. On the 6th, Robert pulled the business card out of his jacket pocket. Murphy must have slipped it in without him noticing. Robert stared at the embossed lettering. Emma Winters, CEO, Horizon Tech. He had looked her up, of course. Couldn't help himself. He found her face on glossy magazine covers, saw her standing on stages with billionaires, smiling that perfected smile. Words like visionary, uncompromising, trailblazer repeated again and again. He slid the card into his desk drawer, tried to forget about it. Their worlds were galaxies apart. Whatever had sparked between them that night, it was a fluke. A moment in time. Best left untouched. At least, that's what he told himself. But fate doesn't care about schedules. Or logic. A week later, Robert found himself elbow-deep in a broken machine at the Meridian manufacturing plant. The kind of job that paid triple if you saved them from downtime. He was focused, hands steady, when he heard it, the sharp click of heels against concrete, accompanied by a chorus of eager voices. He glanced up. Executives trailed behind a plant manager, nodding furiously at every word. And then he saw her, Emma Winters, in a deep blue suit, asking questions with a sharpness that sliced through the room. Her professional mask was flawless. But when her eyes landed on him, just for a moment it cracked. "Robert," she said softly, as though the name carried more weight than anyone else in the room could understand. He froze, wiping his hands on a rag, suddenly hyper-aware of the grease stains on his shirt, the curious eyes of her entourage. "Ms. Winters," he replied, formality slipping out before he could stop it. Her gaze softened. "Emma," she corrected quietly. Then, leaning closer, "I came back. You weren't there." Robert's heart jolted. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her. "Why would someone like you want to talk to someone like me?" The words escaped before he could catch them. Emma glanced at the watching executives, then back at him. Her voice dropped to something only he could hear. "Walk with me." The factory floor suddenly felt too loud, too crowded. And yet, as they stepped away together, the world seemed to fall silent. What truth will Emma reveal when they're alone? And what happens when Robert is forced to choose between protecting his world or stepping into hers? The echo of their footsteps faded into a quieter corner of the factory, away from the workers, away from Emma's entourage, who were pretending not to eavesdrop. Robert folded the rag in his hands, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked beside her sharp suit and composed elegance. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "Not with me." Emma turned, her eyes steady. "Do you know how rare it is for me to talk to someone who doesn't want something from me? Money, status, access, decisions. You're the first person in years who saw me without any of that." He frowned. "That's because I didn't know who you were." "And you still don't," she countered softly. "Not really. The woman at that bar, she wasn't Emma Winters, CEO. She was just Emma. For one night I got to breathe." Robert's jaw clenched. "But now I do know who you are. And I know who I am." He held up his grease-stained fingers, voice low. "And those two people don't belong in the same story." Emma stepped closer, her heels clicking against the concrete. "Don't tell me who belongs in my story. That's my choice to make." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The cavernous space hummed with the sound of machinery and faint voices in the distance. Finally, Robert's defenses cracked. "So who were you at the bar?" Her lips curved, but her voice trembled just slightly. "Someone who could feel alive again." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw the woman beneath the armor. The tiredness in her eyes, the longing in her words. Not the CEO, not the headlines, just Emma. She exhaled, steadying herself. "Will you meet me there tonight? Not by accident this time." The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Robert thought of Lily's homework waiting on the kitchen table, thought of dinner plates, bills stacked in his drawer, the quiet life he had built out of necessity and love. He thought of all the reasons to say no. Instead, he said, 8 o'clock. That evening, Robert stood in front of his mirror longer than he cared to admit. He'd showered, shaved, pulled on the one decent shirt he owned. Dark blue. No fraying at the collar. His hair was still damp, his beard trimmed. He felt foolish for caring so much about appearances, but for the first time in years, he wanted to be seen. He left Lily with a trusted neighbor, promising he'd be home before too late. And with every step toward Murphy's corner, his heartbeat seemed to quicken. The bar looked unchanged, dim lights, peeling wallpaper, the saxophone sighing in the corner. But tonight it felt different, charged. She was already there. Emma sat at the stool that had become hers, her hair tied back casually, her blazer replaced with a simple sweater. No makeup, no armor, just her. When she saw him, her smile wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was genuine, almost uncertain. "You came," she said softly. "So did you," Robert replied, slipping onto the stool beside her. He noticed her phone tucked away in her bag instead of face down on the counter. Murphy approached with a knowing grin. "The usual for both of you?" They exchanged a glance, surprised to realize they already had usuals. Together, they nodded. As Murphy poured their drinks, Robert extended a hand. Robert Hayes, owner of Hayes Repair Shop, father to an 8-year-old butterfly enthusiast named Lily. Emma's lips quirked. She took his hand, her fingers cool against his callous palm. Emma Winters, CEO of Horizon Tech, collector of titles, achiever of mostly empty things. Robert raised a brow. "I wouldn't call a $300 million company empty." "Depends what you measure," Emma said quietly. There was no fanfare, no hesitation. The conversation slipped between them like it had that first night. Only now there was awareness of who they were beyond this bar, of the walls they'd both built, and the cracks forming in them. They talked for hours. About Lily's constellations and butterflies. About Emma's battles with board members who dismissed her expertise. About the strange comfort of finding someone who wanted nothing but honesty. At one point, Robert said softly, "You don't seem like the kind of person who sits in bars with strangers." Emma swirled the amber liquid in her glass. "Maybe I don't want to be that person anymore." Her voice lingered in the air, unspoken promises weaving between them. When the clock neared midnight, Robert walked her outside. The city buzzed with late-night chatter, but around them, silence felt thicker, heavier. She looked at him, her breath forming faint clouds in the cool night. "I don't know what this is," she admitted, "but I know I want to see where it goes." Robert hesitated, torn between fear and longing. "My life, it's not simple. It's not glamorous. It's real," Emma finished, stepping closer. "That's exactly what I need." For the first time in years, Robert didn't feel invisible. And for the first time in years, Emma felt seen. But the world doesn't let people like them stay hidden for long. What happens when Emma and Robert's private connection collides with the public eye, and the life Robert has fought so hard to protect? 2 months later, the city awoke to headlines. Tech CEO Emma Winters spotted leaving modest apartment. Mystery man revealed as single father Robert Hayes. Photos plastered across gossip sites. Emma stepping out of Robert's building, her expression softer than anyone had ever seen in boardrooms. Another picture, blurry, taken from across the street, showed the three of them at a neighborhood cafe. Robert, Emma, and Lily, laughing together. By noon, social media was in flames. Some cheered on, love beyond status. Power couple rewriting the rules. Others sneered, midlife crisis. Publicity stunt. And by evening, Emma's phone wouldn't stop ringing. PR teams, investors, board members, all demanding explanations. Robert saw the stories too. He didn't need headlines to know what the world thought of him. Repair shop owner, widower, charity case. That night, when Emma arrived at his apartment, Lily already asleep, the air between them was different. Heavy. "I saw the news," Robert said quietly. Your board must be thrilled. They'll survive, Emma replied, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. It's not the first time a CEO's personal life has made the press. Maybe not, Robert said. But usually it's about marrying another executive. Not this. He gestured to the worn couch, the humble apartment. To himself. Not dating a man who fixes broken machines, Emma finished, her voice sharp. That's what you think bothers me? That you're somehow beneath me? Aren't I? The words slipped out harsher than he intended. Emma's chest tightened. She moved closer, eyes blazing. Robert, do you really think I'd risk everything I built for what? Pity? Appearances? Then why? His voice cracked. Because I don't fit in your world. You know it. I know it. Emma stopped. Her anger softened into something far more fragile. Maybe I don't want to fit in my world anymore. She reached for his hand. Her voice lowered. You know me. Not the headlines. Not the CEO. Just me. And Lily knows someone who checks butterfly chrysalises and explains stars. Those versions of me feel more real than the one I've spent years perfecting. Robert's hand trembled in hers. The fight drained out of him. Weeks passed. The storm of speculation never fully quieted, but something had shifted. Emma began carving space in her impossible schedule. Real space, for dinners at Robert's, for helping Lily with homework, for sitting on the small balcony staring at the stars. And Robert, for the first time in years, allowed someone into the home he had so fiercely protected. It wasn't easy. Emma still battled boardrooms that questioned her judgment. Robert still fought doubts about being enough. But every time the doubts crept in, there was Lily, with her constellation maps and her small, unwavering belief that Emma belonged with them. One evening, Robert returned from a late repair job to find Emma and Lily asleep on the couch. A storybook lay open across Emma's lap, Lily curled against her shoulder. The sight stopped him cold. Something in his chest shifted, permanent, undeniable. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't chance. This was home. 6 months after their first meeting, Emma invited Robert to Horizon Tech's annual gala. A ballroom glittering with chandeliers, walls lined with investors in suits worth more than Robert's shop. Whispers followed them as they entered. That's him, the repairman. Robert felt the eyes, the weight of judgment, until Emma stood tall beside him, her hand in his. When a group of executives muttered dismissively, she cut them off. Robert has forgotten more about practical engineering than most of Silicon Valley ever knew, she said, her voice sharp as glass. He's already saved this company millions in inefficiencies. But more importantly, she squeezed his hand, glanced at him with pride. He's the most authentic person in this room. The whispers quieted. For once, Robert didn't care if they believed her. Because he did. 1 year after that first question in Murphy's Corner, the three of them sat together at the same bar. Lily, swinging her legs, studying Emma with her usual curiosity. I was thinking about Mom today, Lily said softly. From the pictures. From Dad's stories. Robert's throat tightened. That's important, sweetheart. Lily nodded, then looked at Emma. But if I could choose someone else to be in our family, I'd choose you. Emma froze, her composure faltering. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. Is that okay? Lily asked nervously. I don't want to make anyone sad. Emma took her hand, her voice breaking. It's more than okay. It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. Robert watched them, his daughter, and the woman who had somehow found her way into both their lives. His chest filled with something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. You made us visible again, he said softly, echoing her words from their first night. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Robert and Emma stood on the balcony. The night sky stretched above them, scattered with stars. Do you remember your question? Robert asked. That first night. Emma smiled faintly. If you had one wish, who would you use it for? And what did my answer tell you? That you were someone worth knowing. She turned to face him, eyes shimmering. But I never asked, what would you wish for now? Robert looked at her, at the life they had built. Imperfect, fragile, but real. Nothing, he said finally. For the first time in years, I don't have a wish. Just gratitude. Emma pressed her forehead against his, a smile breaking through. For two people who had spent so long being unseen, being too much or never enough, this was the miracle. To be truly seen. Not a fairy tale ending, but a beginning. What do you think matters more in love? Finding someone who fits into your world, or someone who sees you in ways the world never does?